Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 479 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. On today's show, we're discussing tangible ways to survive and, fingers crossed, hopefully even thrive in late-stage capitalism. Now, our current version of capitalism, many much smarter than me say it is unfair, it's rigged, it's leaving behind so many people. And those of us who are struggling in a late stage capitalistic society, we are struggling again to manage keeping up with its relentless demands. So we're working longer hours. We're feeling increasingly lonely. Overall, we are just less satisfied with life. And don't take my word for it. You just examine the headlines. Headlines these days are filled with content about burnout, loneliness, depression, climate anxiety, rising costs, lack of affordable housing. The list goes on and on. And so in the face of this reality, dare I even say this dismal reality, today's show offers up a few suggestions to help you and me survive late-stage capitalism. Now, here to help me unpack all of that and a little bit more is Laura Oldaney. Laura is a blogger over at richandresilientliving.com. She focuses her efforts on money and lifestyle choices for a regenerative future. Laura, really excited to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm very well, Stephanie, and it's so great to be here with you.
Well, why don't we start? I always love to have my guests introduce themselves. I feel like they always do such a better job than I ever could. So tell us, who are you and what do you do?
So I am a green living and money coach, and I'm the founder of Rich and Resilient Living. And I'm not a financial advisor. I don't have a background where I trained to be a financial advisor, but my work is shaped by my own journey to lead a more environmentally and socially conscious life, and to also try to align my money in that journey, because there are so many ways that our money is actually working towards the opposite of those goals. And as I started into this rabbit hole, more and more people were interested in the conversation as well. More of us feel conflicted. Many of us feel conflicted about all of this. And there were two key factors or influences that I think came together for me at about the same time. And one was that I discovered something known as permaculture, which is this kind of ecological design toolkit that we can apply to all aspects of our lives. Many people who know it know about applying it in their gardens or landscapes, but it's actually a wonderful ecological or regenerative design toolkit. And there are some teachings within permaculture about economics and finance. So I started looking to those. And I also, at about the same time, discovered something called the FIRE community, which is people in pursuit of financial independence retire early. And I really was intrigued by that idea, but it's mostly the path to that is in putting a lot of money in the stock market or accumulating rental real estate portfolio that is exacerbating local housing issues, affordable housing. And so I wanted to merge permaculture and FIRE. I wanted permaculture FIRE. And as I continued down that path, I discovered some other people, particularly in the permaculture space, that were interested in that conversation as well. And we eventually came together and co-wrote a book called Growing Free. And for us, the free stands for financially resilient and economically, ecologically, and ethically empowered. And our subtitle is Building the Life of Your Dreams Without Losing Your Soul or Destroying the Planet. And so that's been the work journey to date, and we're still building it out.
Oh, I love it. Amazing. The world needs more people like you who are taking ideas, synthesizing them, and bringing them out to the masses. I know I found you because, and this is a true story, Laura, I was having a moment of just down in the dumps depression. I think you touched on it a little bit, but the way that we're told to do things if we want to be happy, we have to forget about the environmental consequences of such happiness pursuits, let's say. Like there's a environmental cost with everything. If I like to travel and I get on a plane, there's an environmental cost associated with that. And that's just one example. But I was feeling down in the dumps and I Googled something like, I wish I knew off the top of my head what I Googled, but it was something quite similar to how do I survive late stage capitalism or something like that. And your website was the first that came up. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting to take away some tangible tips and tricks, but I got them. And so I had to invite you on the show. That's what we're discussing today. How do we not only survive, but thrive in a late stage capitalist society? How would you describe late stage capitalism? Because there's a lot of nebulous and freeform definitions on the World Wide Web, but how would you define late stage capitalism? And two-part question, how do you see its consequences manifesting themselves in your own life?
To me, in my mind, the main feature of late stage capitalism is just this tremendous wealth gap that's been created by exploiting workers for their labor while so unfairly compensating them for the value that people are creating through their work for corporations. And then the ramifications of all of that, just the stratification of society in this frustration where there's this small number of people growing wealthier and wealthier, and then this larger number of people really starting to struggle financially. And just how our lives are so, for those of us that are on the other end of this, where we're more apt to be struggling financially, it's really capitalism, not just because of the financial struggle, but because of the nature of late stage capitalism, is really diminishing our quality of life. And in terms of how it encroaches in my life to some extent, I think that part of it, I've tried to design my life as much as possible, although it's not possible to do it completely, but to extricate myself as much as possible or reduce my connection to an involvement in that exploitive capitalist economy. But I exist within the context within which I exist. So there are some realities that I have to contend with. And I think there's so much. Another part of this is this, like the monetization and profit, like seeking to profit off of all aspects of our lives. Corporations are like, what else can we monetize? What else can we charge people for? And I think a great example of that is the airline industry, where we're now paying money to have more legroom or to check bags. It's just, and I remember even hearing at one point, I think there's a low cost airline in Europe called Ryanair. They had experimented with putting like a mechanism on the bathroom door where you had to pay to use the bathroom in the airplane. So it's like these little ways that how else can we extract money from people, extract value. And in my own life, I don't enjoy flying as much. Obviously, for sustainability reasons, I'm trying to do it less, but it went from being a somewhat pleasant experience to just feeling like cattle between the airplane itself, the airports now with all of the security. Like so much more is put on we the people and we the consumers as phone systems are automated, for-profit government systems. It's so much more on us to be frustrated and working through all of this, or healthcare and outsourcing to customer service to people whose first language may not be, in our case, English. And that is on no way to denigrate people who don't speak English as a first language. I want people to have opportunities. But for example, for me with healthcare, when I'm working with my insurance company, our healthcare system is so convoluted and so distorted and so hard to understand. Imagine trying to guide someone through that in a language that's not yours, where we've got this technical language of health problems to begin with, and then the infrastructure. It can end up being a frustrating experience for me, the customer, and I'm sure the employee. We're probably both banging our heads against the wall at the end of some of these calls.
Mm-hmm. I definitely hear your point there with regard to late stage capitalism being what happens when we try and squeeze out every cent we can from citizens. Just very interestingly, I read an article recently in the New Yorker about how county jails across the country, definitely not all of them, but they got rid of in-person family visits and they instituted video calls instead. And of course, with this video calling software, somebody has to pay for it, and it's the family of those incarcerated. And so if they can't pay to set up a video call, they don't get to see their loved ones. And I think that's aptly, what you're saying there. How can we squeeze out every last cent from its people? Not a big deal if you're Bill Gates or one of the 0.01%, but for the rest of us who aren't part of the 0.01%, it could get tiring. It can feel like I feel defeated most days. And so I would just want to read something very quickly from your own website. You write, quote, "Our current version of capitalism is unfair and rigged. It's leaving behind so many people. And even many of those managing to keep up with its relentless demands are working longer hours, feeling increasingly lonely, and are overall less satisfied with life." So just curious, any musings on how we got here?
Oh gosh. So that is another big question. And I think there's a lot to it. And I am not a doomer gloomer that humans are horrible and greedy by nature, but there's certainly this element throughout history, particularly since the dawn of agriculture, where we became much more prone to violence and led by fear and war. And that's not to say that every society since agriculture has had large examples or extremes of inequity, but I think it plays a role. And I think, unfortunately, going really big picture, it saddens me because I think it keeps us all in this amygdala fear-based mind, and we're losing this beautiful human potential we have to be living more in the light and tapping more of our creativity and innovation. And back to your question, again, I'm not a sociologist, a historian, an economist, but certainly when we started the capitalism journey, I think many people looking back can say this is just how it was going to unfold because of the nature of it. But I think there were some guardrails in place, government regulations, and we've certainly seen those taken away over the years. And now with lobbying and things, our elected officials and people in power have this financial motivation that's not helping the situation.
Well, you write and you argue that our lifestyle has already been designed for us. Who designed it?
Oh, again, that's a big one too. I wouldn't say that there's one person or institution behind it all pulling the strings. I think it's just been this evolution, this societal shift in the way our society is structured, what people think, what the mainstream narrative is. But certainly corporations have come in and again are playing a strong influence, have a strong influence in shaping this because it's to their advantage within capitalism to have us working for them, providing that labor force that they need to create their profit. But then also, once people are there in these jobs with these corporations, helping them create the products and services, spending at minimum often 8 hours a day in that job, then by that very nature, they don't have the time to be more self-sufficient and meet more of their own needs. So then they end up needing to buy the products and services that all of these corporations are creating. And even earlier on in the pipeline, our schooling is set up very much to prepare us to be workers in this capitalist corporate economic context within which we exist.
Yeah, I never took a gardening class, grow your own food class in school. Why not? But I'm wondering where learning to think for ourselves fits into the conversation today. If we're talking about strategies to thrive in late stage capitalism, where does learning to think for ourselves, thinking critically about our quintessential American lifestyle that has been designed for us, that we were placed into at birth, where does that fit into our discussion today?
I think it doesn't fit in enough, and I think it's very important, although it actually did come up in a conversation I had just this morning with a friend. She and I are both in our early 50s, and she had been talking to a younger friend, trying to put into words some of the things that she felt were different now than what she remembered earlier in life. And she was talking about the role of influencers, and just the fact that if there are influencers, there are people that are being influenced. And here we are, both of us with social media presences. And I'm not saying we don't need social media, people sharing their message on social media, but it is very thought provoking to step back and think about how much in our lives today we are influenced from all directions. And how do we make space to recognize that and step back and really develop those critical thinking skills and learn to think for ourselves?
Yeah, I always wonder, I only have my own life to go by, my own experience, right? And I wonder how much of it is just maturing, growing older. I know in my 20s, I wasn't necessarily thinking for myself. I was looking around at my peers and doing exactly what they were doing. So I wonder just if it's a natural trajectory that we're all on as we, again, get older. But in this article that I read on your website, you offer strategies for thriving in a late stage capitalist society. And one of your strategies is to stop thinking of ourselves as consumers and instead view ourselves as producers. I love it. Please explain.
Sure. I don't think it's something people think about much, but previously when you would read things, people, the society as a whole was more referred to as citizens. Now we're more, even by our government, now we're more referred to as consumers. And we've just adopted that mindset that we are consumers and that buying and shopping and purchasing things is a part of our existence and it's how we navigate life. But we used to do a lot more of our own producing. And not only is the producing valuable because it will help us save money and it takes back our power, more of our power and authority from capitalism. It's just there's a tremendous sense of joy and satisfaction in producing or making the simplest things. And I think a lot of my work is driven by how to be resilient in a world of climate change. Whether that's financially resilient, emotionally resilient, or just resilient to be able to meet my needs. And I think that it is a fantastic way, even if it's just as little as starting by, when you need something, can you start by Googling DIY, whatever it is I need, and seeing if there's a way you can make it, and finding space or time in your life to try and make it with some simpler things at first.
Mm. You're speaking, I believe, to those age-old self-sufficient skills that over the decades we just collectively have lost. Gardening again, growing our own food, making that loaf of bread, mending your own socks, heck, knitting your own socks. I could go on. And you speak aptly to the point that when we don't have these skills, we then by default have to be consumers of these products. And also you mentioned the joy, the personal benefits, the personal wellness benefits that are so often felt in those of us who do create, who do produce. That again is lost. Those wellness benefits are lost when we're essentially, outsourcing, getting all these items from some corporation. And so I thank you for mentioning that, I want to talk to you about attention capital and using it wisely, but we got to take our break, Laura. So we're going to take our sponsor break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss your thoughts on using attention capital wisely. I'll see you in a minute. And we're back. Today I'm speaking with Laura Oldaney. She is a blogger. She's the brains behind richandresilientliving.com. Linked in the show notes, by the way, listeners. But her website focuses on money and lifestyle choices for a regenerative future. Before the break, we were talking about a lot of things, Laura, but we were specifically talking about viewing ourselves as less as consumers and more as producers, which is something I've been working on for 8-10 years. Every year I try and teach myself a new age-old self-sufficient skill so that I can pass it down to my children. And you know what? I enjoy. Last year was sourdough bread. I had a lot of struggles, but I also received a lot of joy from the process. Now I want to talk to you about attention capital. What on earth is attention capital, and how can we better use it wisely?
If we think about the value of anyone's attention, your attention, everyone's attention, as demonstrated by how much money Mark Zuckerberg and other people, other social media platform owners are earning just through attention, because people are paying attention to social media or whatever it is people are paying attention to that then earns someone money. This is that attention capital. And so often people are scrolling on social media mindlessly. And my point isn't to say to get off of social media, but I would encourage people to become more mindful of how much time they're spending on social media. How is their time on social media making them feel? Is their time on social media benefiting someone else financially more than it's benefiting you financially? Are you using your time on social media only as a mindless escape, or going down a rabbit hole of fear, listening to different posts or getting yourself riled up? I'm not saying to ignore those things completely, to ignore the news, but can you be stepping away from it more? Can you be finding content that fills you with joy, that teaches you new information or helps you develop those skills that would give you that sense of pride and accomplishment if you were able to do something new?
You gave me the perfect plug, Laura. So I'll just say, listeners, if your social media use is not making you happy, and if you are concerned that your attention is making other people rich, your attention is worth something, plug for our upcoming book club. We're reading How to Break Up with Your Smartphone, and we're going through the 30-day breakup together. So if you're interested, link to join us is in the show notes. But if we're not on social media, or if we're not attending to our phones, where do you best suggest we put our attention? Simple question, but I'm interested to see what you do with it.
Again, I think part of it depends on what your interests are. And remember that I'm coming at this from the perspective of building resilience. And I think we have this loneliness epidemic that even our Surgeon General is talking about here in the U.S. And I don't think it's just in the U.S. I think isolation has increased in many places. So for me, a big part of it is placing the emphasis on interactions, with in-person interactions, whether that's getting to know people in your apartment building or in your neighborhood community. And those personal connections are a huge part of resilience in a climate challenged world.
I think what you're speaking to there is social capital. But I must say, and I've talked about this a lot on my podcast because it's such a big part of my life, but I do feel that my smartphone, the technology that surrounds me, has absolutely stripped me of those real world connections. I just reread Digital Minimalism for anybody by Cal Newport. If anybody has read it or heard of it, I highly suggest it. He makes the distinction between connection and community. We think that a lot of likes and comments on social media is connection. That's not true connection. True connection comes through community. Do you have any tips for me, thoughts for me, somebody who I didn't grow up with a smartphone, but since my 20s, I've had one, and it's definitely detracting from my social wellness. Any ideas for me?
Sure, I have a number. One would be to just look for neighborhood civic association meetings or your city council meeting. Connect with people in your area. We need more people to get involved in being concerned about local issues and local politics. And we all, I think many of us that are thoughtful are concerned about things out there in the world, and it starts with the local. And the problem is the solution. Get engaged. Those meetings can be great ways to get to know the people closest to you beyond your family that live in your area. That would be one. There are more and more mutual aid efforts, mutual aid groups. I happen to live in an area that has an active time bank. People can look up and see if there's a time bank in their area. People involved in time banks are often interested in building these kinds of connections. Many of us have local buy nothing groups that are administered through Facebook or an app. And while most of that is the exchange of items, those would be great groups to try and initiate some kind of in-person gathering, or looking for local clothing swaps or hosting a clothing swap. Find ways to interact with people who are also having these kinds of concerns and inclinations. For me, again, permaculture, I mentioned at the beginning, has been a great gateway to this. And people can look online and search for permaculture groups in their area. They're another way to connect with people who are concerned about these issues and questioning capitalism. Volunteering, whether it's at a community garden or a food bank or whatever is your interest, finding things that interest you and going to free talks in your area about the topics that are of interest to you.
What I hear you saying is get out there. I'll just rebut that a little bit. Like, I hear you, you're totally right. But I'll just say that the little gremlin inside of me is saying, but I'm so tired. I don't have the energy to put myself out there. That's my own thing I have to work on personally. But I have to ask you, what on earth is a time bank? I've never heard of it before.
So a time bank is a bank of sorts, an online bank where the currency is time, not money. And they're generally local initiatives. So you're exchanging with people in your community, but it's all administered through a software. So it's not a direct exchange with a certain individual. It's like my friend borrows my lawnmower and then she logs the exchange in the time bank software. And then I can go use that credit to have another time bank member, the credit that I earned from that, with another time bank member to take pictures of me for use on social media. And so there's so much potential with these time banks. They're a heavy lift for a community, but there are some that already exist that people can look and find out. I think the website is timebanks.org, or if people Google search time banks, the main website will pop up and you can look and see if there's one in your area. Or even the Post Growth Institute helps people, trains people in hosting offers and needs markets. You can bring people together in your community. I think there are so many resources out there that just get overlooked or don't get asked for. And these offers and needs markets can bring people together, and people can say what they need, and then other people can say what they can offer, and you can just connect people.
Mm. Capitalism, of course, runs on the dollar, on money. And what I hear you saying is we're taking that form of currency out of the equation altogether, at least in the form of time banks. I love that. I love that. So speaking of taking the currency out of the equation, you also suggest that we redefine wealth. I want to know how we should be redefining it. I have some ideas on a personal level, but I also feel like it's so hard to redefine wealth in terms of free time, let's say, or quality moments spent with your family. I feel like it's so hard. Like, you can do it here or there, but redefining wealth on a personal level for the long haul in a culture that defines wealth in one very stringent financial manner can be really darn hard. Any thoughts?
Sure. And I definitely hear that and acknowledge that. I think to some extent, everyone's version of true wealth is going to differ a little bit, but we've been fed this message that wealth is a lot of financial capital, like accumulating it at the expense of people and planet. It's these showy demonstrations of wealth, of yachts and big houses and fast cars and expensive luxury items. But so much of the research around, I guess, true wealth or happiness shows us that those aren't the things we really want. If we give ourselves the space to think about what a wealthy life looks like to us, and it's more often about wanting time autonomy over our time to choose how we use it, how we spend it. And so again, that's going to vary some from person to person. I don't have children, so time with children isn't going to be one of the things on my list, but I'm sure it's going to be for many other people. We can do this quality of life statement. That's an exercise that I recommend for people to get clear on what a wealthy life looks like to them. It's also, there's a section in our book, Growing Free, where we walk people through really helping them think about what a wealthy life looks like to them. There's another book that really helped me in my thinking called Redefining Rich by Shannon Hayes. And she was the one that introduced me to the quality of life statement. And she talked about how one of the key elements in her life that she wanted to be sure to design into it was the time to take naps. And I think, so again, that's going to vary from person to person. But when I think about true wealth on a climate challenged planet, that financial wealth, which is so fragile and precarious and speculative and based on digits that exist in a system powered by fossil fuels that can just disappear if the power grid ever goes down. People in Austin in Texas during that major winter storm couple years ago, they couldn't get to their money in their ATMs. They couldn't get money out of the ATMs. What does a holistic picture of real wealth look like? And how do you design more of that into your life?
Mm-hmm. I actually interviewed Shannon Hayes on the show a couple of years back, read Redefining Wealth. I'll relink to that sleepy episode. And I say it's sleepy because I haven't thought about it in a couple of years, but she's so great. Her work is so great. And I must say, as you were talking there, Laura, I was thinking about how my daughter, she's just spent a week at her grandparents and she's home for the first full day today, and we're just having a lazy day around the house. We're hanging up the laundry in the sun. We're hanging out on the porch. We were making paper airplanes because that's what she wanted to do. We were petting our pets and just relaxing. The ability to be able to have a whole day to relax with my daughter, who I missed greatly over the past week, that is a form of wealth. Like, who told us that wealth was that number in the bank account? Who told us that wealth was how many homes and how many boats you own? Who told us that, and why did we buy into it? I guess that's a rhetorical question that I'll save to think about on my own time. But before we say goodbye, Laura, I just want to talk about reducing consumption. As a minimalist, reducing consumption is a main tenet of my lifestyle. How does reducing consumption to needs, buy for needs and buy less for wants, how is that a technique for thriving in late stage capitalism?
I would say a number of things. One is it reduces our need to earn and spend money so much and spend so much time earning money from a bullshit or unsatisfying job when being trapped in the hamster wheel. And it makes more time in our lives to get to that true wealth that you were just talking about, to have that time and space for it. And it reduces the likelihood that we're trapped in consumer credit card debt. that can often be an obstacle for people. Again, I think a big part of it is just that reducing that consumption really opens up the space in our lives for what is truly meaningful to us. And it gives us the space to increase the joy and satisfaction in our lives, which I think the more joyful and satisfied we are, often the less we do to participate in and uphold these harmful elements of capitalism that are leaving so many of us conflicted.
Yeah. Are you saying there that the more we redefine wealth in terms of our own personal terms and live our lives according to those personal terms, the less we find ourselves desiring the unnecessary items that are marketed and advertised to us? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's part of it. I think the action of consuming less by being less focused on buying things, the time and energy it takes to think about what I want or need to buy, how I'm going to store and maintain what I buy or continue to afford what I buy. When we get rid of that in our lives, we're freeing up more space for what is truly meaningful and beneficial in our lives.
So it goes both ways. Well, Laura, what a conversation. I have so much to think about. I'm going to be up all night with my mind running. Tell us one more time, where can we learn more about you and find your work?
So my website is richandresilientliving.com. And if anyone wants to go further down the rabbit hole of thriving and surviving in the midst of late stage capitalism, in the shop section of my website, I have a capitalism survival guide, and it highlights 25 strategies to help you navigate these uncertain times. There are journal prompts. There are links to other articles on my blog, YouTube videos I've found, and other resources that have really shaped my thinking in this space. So that's a tool that's available to people. And I also am on Instagram and TikTok at rich_resilient.
Laura, thank you so much for your time. I wish you so much success. And again, major props to you for putting your goodness, your message out into the world. We need more messages like yours. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. You're putting an important message out there in the world too, and giving people a platform to share their message. It's wonderful.
Listeners, that's a wrap. Show notes at mamaminimalist.com/479. We have no eco tip today, but we do have a couple pieces of housekeeping issues. First one is book club, Monday, August 5th. I'll be hosting 2 meetings, one at 12 noon, another at 7 p.m. Eastern, both times Eastern, in hopes that everyone who wants to attend can. If you want to join book club, the way to do that is in the show notes. We have been reading and have been breaking up with our phones. The book is How to Break Up with Your Phone. It's a quick, easy read. As I'm recording this, I'm on day 8 of my 30-day breakup. I have deleted social media from my phone because that was day, I believe, 5. I am not looking back. I was so afraid to delete Instagram. This is really embarrassing, but I was like having anxiety in my chest over the thought of deleting Instagram in particular. I just did it. I just clicked on the X in the corner and I deleted it. That doesn't mean I can't use Instagram because I can still get onto it on my computer. It just means I'm no longer choosing to use my phone for social media purposes. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. So if your cell phone use is hindering true living, as mine has been historically hindering true living for me, consider joining us. Again, link is in the show notes. 2 more quick pieces of housekeeping. The next is I need your eco tips. I love it when you send them to me. Send them my way. If I don't respond to your email, just know that I got it and your eco tip will be in a future episode. I'm just so bogged down with my emails lately. I'm so far behind. So that's that. Send me your eco tips if you have them. An eco tip, of course, and for my newer listeners, you may not know, an eco tip is something you're doing in your life to fight back against overconsumption, to make the planet a little bit greener, to make your home a little bit more eco-friendly. No eco tip is too small. There's no wrong eco tip. If you've been doing something that you think somebody else might want to hear about, send it my way and it'll become an eco tip. My final piece of housekeeping today is I have not asked for reviews in a while. So if you like this show and you want to see it continue and grow, please consider leaving it a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you for taking the 60 seconds to do that. I really, truly appreciate it. And actually, as I say that, I have one more piece of housekeeping. This show recently switched hosting providers, and that doesn't mean anything for you all. You don't need to know that. It's a good change for me. I'm leaving a predatory host, going to, hopefully, fingers crossed, a less predatory host. But that means that ad markers may be in the wrong spots. Perhaps, you're listening and then all of a sudden an ad pops up. If anything doesn't sound right as you're listening, I need you all to know that you're my eyes, and more specifically, you're my ears. So as I'm transitioning to this new hosting platform, if you hear something that doesn't sound right, as in there's a technical issue, please tell me. Please tell me. I have 479 episodes. There are certainly things that are going to fall through the cracks. So if you wouldn't mind helping me out, sending me an email when you see something wrong, that would, again, make my life so much easier. So thank you. We'll be back next Tuesday. I will see you then. Reach out if you need me. I appreciate you all, and take care.